infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Well, yeah, George, welcome on the show. I appreciate you taking the time out to do this. The event that we're going to be mostly talking about is, as you said in the beginning, something that may have been a little bit darker than the rest of the activity in the home. And that happened when you were around 11 years old. But you sent me a fantastic historical background article, or I would assume that's on microfiche at this point, right? Which is pretty amazing, about the actual house that this occurred in, this and the other activity. And this is on the historical registry. I guess is that the right terminology to use? It's a house in Pennsylvania. But George, I didn't know if you wanted to start with the history of the house, or, you know, some of the activity that was going on there. I don't know where you would like to begin with this.
I might as well start with the house and like how we ended up there. Let's see, 1972 or so, my parents and I were living in Philadelphia. You know, I was 3, and I guess they decided to get out of the, downtown. My father found this house. It had been empty for years. It was a very impractical house, nearly impossible to heat. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 bedrooms, 8 fireplaces. It was the one house I told you designed by a fellow named, I think, Edward Durang, who just designed Catholic churches. And he designed this one house while he was staying in the original house, which had been built there in 1756. He was in town to design, work on some churches, and he ended up staying here in the town where I grew up. Ended up designing a one-of-a-kind house for the owners of this big property. It was built from 1860 to 1865 and completed in 1865.
Yeah, do you know why did he just feel like building this house, or was he good friends with these folks and it was kind of a favor?
I don't exactly know. I mean, the people who really knew, there was a descendant of this family who lived nearby, and I remember being a young child, and my mother would take me over to visit her, and she was probably 90, and she lived in a house that was built for her later when she had to move off the property. It was just a big old Gothic pile, slate roofed, formal living room, formal dining room. Really unique place. I mean, I never saw another house like it.
In the home that you guys lived in, that you said had that many fireplaces, is something a little different. That's a lot of space, right? Do you know this? This is a very random question, but I'm just wondering about the size for my own brain. Do you know this around the square footage of that home?
You know, I never knew like to if like the third floor should be counted, because there was literally 6 rooms on the third floor that
Wow.
were ostensibly rooms. We weren't always using them, but we did have the local college kids. We would rent rooms to them, and they would live up there. And that was, one of the students who was up there had some bizarre experiences, to say the least.
Oh, we'll be getting to that for sure. I'm making all these notes because this house is pretty fantastic and a little bit different than a lot of the places that I get to talk about. So, and you already mentioned the designer, so I don't think we need to. And it is you can actually take tours. Is that right? From what I was seeing online to this day, right? Like it's a public place at this point.
Well, it's private. I mean,
Mm.
somebody bought it. It was on House and Garden TV within the last 10 years. Somebody bought it and like completely just reimagined it, like, changed the functionality of all the rooms and just modernized it and gave it a big modern eat-in kitchen where the formal living room was. They did a very good job, and they also like really heavily worked the grounds and did a bunch of stuff.
That does
And
make you wonder, though, because, and I'm sure you've heard it too, when you start to remodel in any way, shape, or form in an active home, things can really kick up. I wonder if that happened, when they were starting to do some of this stuff.
I wonder, because, I mean, I stopped in there one day and just with my family and my wife and two kids, wanted to show them the house, and I just said, "Oh, I'm going to go knock on the door." And the owners of the house weren't home, but like the nanny was home and let us in and wander around. I didn't get any sense that there was anything spooky going on in the house from anybody who I met that day. But I mean, talking about the construction, when my parents bought that house in '72, there was a lot to do. There was like broken windows, and there was just a lot that needed to be fixed. Porches had rotted off, and there was a lot of carpentry work to be done. And the first sign of anything, I guess you'd say, paranormal was my mother kept hearing piano music coming from the big formal dining room. Actually, there's a picture in that article in the historical bulletin that shows the spot where historically the piano was. My mother would go to this room and open the door and the music would stop. And this happened over and over again, right after they moved in. And eventually she, like, just to prove she wasn't going crazy, she got, the workers who were there say, "Follow me. Do you hear piano music?" And like, of course they went and opened the door and it would stop. And then, I mean, that situation really kind of resolved itself when my parents got a piano and put it in that spot.
No
And
kidding.
never happened again.
Wow, that's cool. It appeased them.
Yes.
In the article, it was a little confusing because they were mentioning like there's an original house, but then there was like something was torn down, and then maybe there was two buildings on the property at some point. So I know that right now, when you look it up, it's called Finley House, but then there's also it's called the Walnut Hill House as well, from 1865. Which home did you live in, and what was that situation there? Was there ever two homes standing at the same time on the property?
No. I think the Kerwin family, that was the family. I think they probably went elsewhere nearby while this house was being built, on top of where the other house was, because
Okay.
there was no foundation somewhere on the property of the other house. They went right over on top of it. I mean, that's what happened there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was reading how they procured all of the stone and lumber for the original home from right there from the property. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's actually that was all quarried at the current site of Rosemont College, which is was a all female Catholic college, and we used to have students from there live with us. But yeah, if you go to the grotto over there, that's basically where all the rock came from.
Wonder what kind of rock that is. I didn't see it in the article, but we hear rumors of the old stone tape and all of that, having to do with when homes are built and things just get stuck inside. Extra special, like when there's certain things that homes are built of. But okay, so yeah, I don't know if you wanted to do maybe chronological makes the most sense, George. Do you think?
I mean, it's hard for me to pin down exactly when things happened. I mean, I can bring up all the kind of greatest hits,
Yeah.
which were all very positive, I have to say. Like, it's the kind of thing, there was no air conditioning in this house, of course. So, like, my parents on a couple of occasions left, and, a major thunderstorm came in the summer, and windows were open everywhere, and they'd come home and all the windows would be shut. Somebody broke while we were on vacation, somebody broke into the basement, and, my father noticed it when he got back to the house and called the police, and the police went down there and said, yeah, he broke in one side and he broke out the other side.
Mm.
Left his tools, like something, they said something probably spooked him. And I can understand that, being in that basement. That's very spooky down there.
I bet.
Let's see, one day my sister was sick when she was maybe 3 years old, and my mother had to be outside, like, directing some tree work that had to be done. There was like workmen there and they had questions, and so she had to leave my sister. And when my mother got back, my sister said, oh, the lady came to check on me. And my mother's like, what lady? And my sister described, like, kind of a older lady who came in to to check on her. I mean, she didn't say she was dressed in period clothing, but this figure was the one that seemed to have the most presence, because this woman, who I think we traced her to be like a nanny, an Irish nanny, because there was records of nannies who were from Ireland. And I remember my mother saying, well, it was probably this person at this period of time in the late 1800s. And house guests would always experience something, and they would say, who is that lady? Who, I just saw a lady walking down the hall. I mean, at this point, my parents are just like, oh, I don't know, because it was all sort of very positive. I was in the kitchen when something really bizarre happened. One of the students had come into the kitchen to maybe get her food, because there wasn't any refrigerator upstairs, so she kept her food in the refrigerator in her kitchen. And she noticed a ceramic, pretty interesting ceramic dish that was like a wild boar. She wanted to take a look at it. I wasn't watching, but my father was. She went over and reached up, because it was about, I don't know, 6.5 feet off the ground, up on a high shelf. And the whole ceramic thing came off the shelf and cleared over her head and broke at her heels, shattered, which was pretty odd.
How did she
Uh,
react to that?
she was very apologetic. She was like, I don't know what happened. But she didn't touch it. It just, like, kind of left the shelf and ended up shattered on the floor. I don't know if it was because she was reaching for it, or what. Might as well continue into some other students. All kinds of people lived up there. I mean, I remember we had like a fugitive from Lebanon was living up there. People could rent it. But usually it was Villanova University students, because that's where this was. And we had a tie-in with the Villanova track team. The track coach would send some of his runners, like, to us if there was some issue with, how student housing, or maybe they didn't get the right housing, or I don't know why they weren't on campus, but these two guys who were on the track team were up there, and the one guy just like had super bad luck the whole time he was there. And this guy was a long distance runner on a, Division 1 track team. And he came down one morning and he was sort of sheepish. He was actually using our bedding. I don't know why, but he was. There were holes like burned through 3 pieces of bedding, almost like if you took like a cigar and like pressed until it burned and went through, burned and went through, burned and went through. About the width, oddly, of how far apart eyes would be. And this was, not a guy who smoked or nobody using an electric blanket because it was the summer. And he just came down and said, I don't know how this happened, but I'm sorry about what happened to your bedding here. There was just you never quite know what to say to these people. I usually, I was young, so I really didn't have to say anything. Just watch and say, oh, another incident. But he had things happen like a big overstuffed chair that was ours, but we left it up there in the rooms, fell apart on him. He was shooting baskets out front with the other guy. The other guy took a shot and the rim and separated from the backboard and hit him. They were washing dishes in the kitchen and a glass broke and cut him. There's just a lot of weird things that happened to this one guy. And it was just too coincidental that like nothing ever happened to anybody else, but just this one guy.
Was there anything negative about him? Did he have a bad attitude? Anything stick out about him in particular?
No. I mean, he was just I think he was like a really good student. And, I was probably about 10 when he was there. He was some kid from Jersey who was a track runner, but there was they weren't, there was never any bad actors up there. Nobody was partying or doing anything. They were like really sort of dedicated to, being long distance runners.
Yeah, I don't see somebody like that lighting up a cigar up there and then burning 2 different places on through 3 different layers of sheets and blankets, right? That's very odd.
It was really like to see him hold it up and have the burn holes about as far apart as somebody's eyes was really weird. We just didn't know what to say. It was like, I don't know how this came to be. I mean, I don't know, lightning? I don't know. How'd this happen?
And what did your mom, I know, I'm sure your dad was around for some of the piano stuff and all the windows being open and then closed by the time you got home. That's also very strange. What would your dad say about all these happenings?
Well, he took it pretty in stride because there was no negative about it. I mean, it all seemed positive, and even to the point where his father's side of the family was like they were mystery people. Like I to this day I don't know who they were. They were English, and all I ever heard growing up was that his sister, I didn't even know what her name was, but that she was a kleptomaniac. I didn't even know what that meant. So at some point she did come to America and we were away when she was there. My father's mother brought her to see the house, and my grandmother didn't get around very well, so she just sort of knowing like, this rumor of the kleptomaniac, let her into the house. She was, according to my grandmother, in the house for about 3 minutes. And then she came out and got in the car and just asked to leave. Eventually, my grandmother got out of her that she had seen my mother had this very elaborate dollhouse that was at the top of the stairs, and that she had gone up the stairs to go see this dollhouse. Something stopped her. She felt like she couldn't go any further, and she was compelled to turn around and go back down the stairs.
And can you let people know what a kleptomaniac is?
Someone who just steals compulsively, I think.
Right, like they just can't control it, right?
Yeah, it's just funny. Like the only thing I ever heard about her was that she was a kleptomaniac. I don't know her name, and this is the sister of my grandfather. I had no idea who these people were, and he had left England, and I guess they were all back there. I don't know.
Now, what about the furniture within the home? Was any of it original or very, very old?
Oh yeah, my father actually, when he bought the house, he really, my father really loved antiques, so he set up a business or helped set this guy up in business as an antique dealer. So I think my father partially financed him, but basically in order to get first shot at things. It was it was decorated with very old things that looked appropriate to the house. There wasn't modern anything. There was no, there wasn't a comfortable couch to be found for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it was, there was a big formal dining room with big old sideboards and grandfather clocks and old stuff, period piece stuff.
Yeah, I guess when you have a house with 8 or 9 fireplaces and a ton of bedrooms and the history that it already had at that point, you're going to want to go along with the flavor of the house. I would have to agree with that. Although maybe one comfy couch would have been nice.
It would have been, yeah. It was
You're like,
not
take
fun
it from
growing up
me.
to try to watch TV in like a hard backed, like formal love seat or something.
Right. Like one of those high back chairs that you feel like I look like a king, but I don't feel like a king.
That's right. I might want to segue into the things that I actually experienced. I even may have forgotten some of the anecdotal stories, but they were all along those lines. They were like house guests would say, think somebody was in my room last night. Things like that. Especially foreign house guests would really get like investigated.
Like to the
Or
point where they would wake and see someone or something at the foot of the bed kind of a thing.
I never heard that. They would see this female figure in the hallway, in
Mm.
the front hall, like just passing by, and they'd say, well, and they'd wonder who that is. And, of course, we never really had an answer.
But
Um,
maybe the nanny, as you said, right? Maybe that Irish nanny.
believe so. I think
Mm.
really seems to be what the vibe was. It was somebody who was helpful and watchful. Checking in on my sister when she was sick and my mother was busy, couldn't be by her side. So the things that I experienced on more than one occasion, I experienced, the deep temperature drop combined with a heavy perfume. Wish I could describe what that perfume was, but it was something heavy. And, you could feel like the temperature drop, good 10, 15 degrees, and this smell would come out of nowhere. And, usually be like I'd be playing in my room or something, and that would come about. And it didn't happen all the time, but it happened. It happened enough that I noticed it.
Now, was
Um,
that exclusive to you? Did you ever hear of anyone else experiencing that?
no, nobody else ever mentioned it. I mean, I think I was probably of an age that I would have mentioned it at that point. I don't remember discussing that one with my parents. I might have just, said I smelled some kind of perfume smell. But outside of the incident, which we'll get to maybe after I just, sign off with the paranormal, I think I was close to being a senior in high school, and I had just cleaned up a mess that the cats had made in the dining room. Their cat box was in there behind a bunch of potted plants, and the cats had kicked stuff all over the place. I was sort of on my way to school, but I went in, I cleaned it up, and as I exited the dining room, the top of the ice bucket somehow managed to get all the way across the room and hit the wall and rattle onto the floor, which was really one of the last things that I experienced because I was probably close to being a junior or a senior in high school when that happened. But that was definitely, an expression of some kind of displeasure. And ice bucket, the top of ice buckets, even if like, people would say, did the cat knock it off? The cat can't get it all the way across the room, have it hit the wall, and it's the top of an ice bucket. They don't Tops of ice buckets don't move.
So there was no one else to corroborate that one. You were probably like, dang it, no one else see this.
Yeah, but I just like, I sort of stared and, had a momentary startle, and then I was, it's just chalk it up. It's, oh, there's another one.
Right.
That at that point, not much had happened in a while. I remember discussing this one with my father. It made me go back and ponder the incident that was, the wild card, which I had never thought about that deeply, just figuring it was some kind of ghostly situation, which was uh, let me set this whole thing up. I think I was 11 or 12, and my friend was sleeping over. I don't remember any details of what had happened that day, but at some point, I just found myself kneeling on the radiator by that window. And there's a picture that really shows the house well, and the window that's second floor, that was my room. I think you've seen the picture.
Yeah.
It was in that article. So I find myself kneeling on the big, metal radiator that was next to the bed, looking out the window into an extremely bright night. I mean, it was like lit by floodlights or something. And I'm staring out there. I say to myself in my head, "Why are you looking out the window?" Or I was like, "Well, what's going on out there?" And a voice in my head answered, "Don't worry about it." Don't know how much time went by, but something hit the door, which was a big, like 6.5 foot tall or 7 foot tall door, 3-inch thick wood, hit the door. It flew open and struck the bed that was by that door where my friend was sleeping, and the door shuddered on its hinges. I turned at that point and I saw a very short figure move into the room. The thing that was most strange about it is I didn't have any kind of like reaction. It was just like, oh, what's that? I didn't even say anything. I had been like having this internal, I guess, monologue or dialogue in my head about like, what are you doing? And it was all with the answer was, don't worry about it. So this thing came in. I was looking at it. I will say that where its face should be was scrambled. So it was like, if somebody's, in court or something and they're hiding their face and they scramble it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This thing, I couldn't see what it was, but it made a very strange set of noises that I can't even start to imitate. And then, without further ado, it exited the room and the door whipped shut. And my friend woke up and was, apoplectic. And, he had to, get his mother to come get him. And there was all this big to do, but I was dead flat. I had like no opinion on the matter. I don't know if my heart rate changed. It was like I was under some kind of control. That night was so strange, and it wasn't talked about much afterwards because my parents had no kind of idea. It was just this kid was terrified and had to go home. And he doesn't know what he saw, but he was terrified. I never really talked to him about it because it was just with the history of the house having so much paranormal activity. It was just like, oh, that must be the ghost activity.
Right.
But after that incident with the cat box, I was talking with my father about it. I started to like think about it, and I told him, that story again because he had never, ventured anything about that story when I told him. And that's when he told me that when he was in college, he was driving home from I think he had gone to maybe some kind of mixer or something at Connecticut College, which is on the coast of Connecticut, and he was going to Wesleyan, which is in central Connecticut. So he was driving home, and he says he was being followed by some lights, and he remembers pulling over and getting out of his car, and he remembers getting back in his car and continuing on back to college, but he lost about 3 hours. And I had never known that. He said that when he took a shower the next day, he noticed that there was a rectangular section of skin missing from his left inner thigh.
Now, what about you? Do you have any marks like that?
No, no. I mean, if you follow it out, I mean, it could be, that if he had been at a quote unquote lost time, abduction, they could have been back to check on him or do whatever reason those entities would come back to see a person again, collecting data, I guess. It certainly seemed like that's what it was.
And he doesn't recall any more encounters or even seeing strange lights after that one time.
No. No, he didn't have any. There was nothing mysterious that he offered. It was this terror situation in the middle of the night for my friend that he had to go home, and it was I remember standing in the hallway upstairs and just sort of being like really blank about the whole thing. Something crazy had just happened, but I never my heart rate never changed. That's what freaks me out about the whole thing.
Right. Well, and besides the fact that your friend didn't even experience this being or entity or alien, whatever it is, and he was the one that was freaking out and had to go home and was inconsolable about the whole thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I wish like I could, reconnect with this person and talk about it, but I know he's actually had a lot of difficulties, and it's not the kind of thing I'm going to reach out and
Right.
try to tap his brain on that. Yeah, so that was the wild card incident in this whole thing. Now, I will also say, and I don't have the timeline right, but it's very interesting because I didn't put this together until I really started to think about this. There was another time when I woke up in the middle of the night and I was looking out that same window, but from my bed, and I focused on one of the panes of glass. It's for some reason it was the right side, the third pane of glass up on the left, because they were these big divided, huge windows. And I was lying in bed, focused on that one pane of glass, looking through it. And I could see into the night sky, and I could see stars. And I could also see one that was moving in a very wild and erratic pattern. It was zigging and zagging. It looked like it was doing trigonometry up in the air. And why I had woken up and known to look out that pane of glass where I saw that, a star just doing crazy, what I thought was a star at first, but, then, it was just something moving in a crazy pattern.
And do you recall
zigzagging.
if it left, if it just zoomed off, or do you recall maybe going back to sleep?
I don't remember. I just remember that I saw this, and I don't know why I decided to focus on that, but I was shown something. It's very mysterious. That's the only time that ever happened. And it was sometime in the vicinity of when this happened. I know it had to have been, within a year or two at least. It could have been within the same week. I just don't remember.
But as you said, you're not sure of the timeline exactly. That could have been before or after the being.
Could have been before or after.
Yeah, and it is strange that your brain, not only did you wake up and you had this state of mind where you're like, I'm going to focus out this one pane of glass. That is my focus. And oh, look at that star doing this weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure I watched it for a good minute and a half doing whatever crazy maneuvers, just like something that, didn't make any sense at all. But I was there to see it for some reason.
And why were you able to witness this being? Was that a screw up on their part?
Certainly, I mean, that's if you follow it out. If you follow it out from, my father could have been taken. Who knows? But if you follow that out, that certainly seems what it was. It certainly
Mm-hmm.
seems like everybody in the house was shut down, but they missed me somehow. But I was in some kind of state. I mean, I was having, it's like, why are you looking out the window? Don't worry about it. I answer in
Mm-hmm.
my head. And it was crazy, crazy lit up outside. I mean, it was beyond daylight.
And after the little dude left and the door slammed, do you remember turning around at all or being aware that the lights then were gone or had dimmed or left or whatever?
No, because my friend was really out of sorts at that point. I think I just went over and turned on the light. I wasn't thinking anymore about outside. I was more thinking about this thing that had
Right.
just gone down.
Right, as you should. Yeah, if you see something like that, especially with a face that is scrambled, blur-like. So, how long was it standing there? So the door slams open. It bonks against the bed. That was a good picture that you painted of that. How long was it standing there before it exits again?
I'd say it came into the room and was there for less than 10 seconds. And during that time, it made these sounds that I, I can't even start to duplicate. They were sort of liquidy and clicky at the same time.
Mm.
And then it withdrew. It's like it withdrew. It's almost like it slid out. Like it's not like it turned around and strode. It just like kind of slid back out of the room, and without anything touching the door just whipped shut.
I mean, even if it was there for a full count of 5, and this is after a door has slammed open and smacks into your friend's bed, right? That you had set
Yep.
up or whatever that he was sleeping on. By all rights, he should have woken up right then and there with the door hitting his bed, and he still didn't.
He did.
So,
No, he did.
oh, he did.
He saw it. He was terrified. Yeah.
Oh, I had that completely wrong. I thought he didn't wake up until after the dude left. Okay, sorry.
No, no, no. He was.
Well, never
He
mind.
was.
That makes even a whole lot more sense than before. Okay.
And like afterwards, I was like, was that the dog? I mean, it's like, what the heck was this? Then I was like, oh, it must be the ghosts. This is some new thing. I was just trying to think what it could be. I had no reason to be thinking about aliens. My father, growing up, he was very interested in the subject. I mean, he
Mm.
he had any book that was out there, like Zachariah Stitchin and like those things,
Yeah, yeah.
like all those books, the Mothman, all that action. He had a whole like collection of these books. He would get anything on the subject, and this was like the 70s and the early 80s. So There was no internet, but he was very interested in the subject. But I never knew until I, brought up the incident again and tried to like talk my way through it with him that he had something happen to him.
Well, then what did he say about your experience?
He didn't really. I don't remember him really dwelling into it or speculating. Maybe I said things that he may have nodded, and I don't know. He didn't really. He didn't give me a lot on that one, but we did talk about it. But he wasn't like speculating that they had come back for him, and I don't know. He didn't give me a lot there.
It does make you wonder, as you say, he was interested in years and years about this stuff. It does beg the question, then maybe he's blocked out even earlier incidents or just one incident like you've had and he just simply can't remember it because, you even used the term turned off. Maybe everyone in the house was turned off at the time. Oh, which I wanted to ask, who all was home that night? Were your parents both home? Was your dad there?
Yeah, he was there. My mother was there. My sister was there. Yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like a screw up on their part, right? Like, why would you even remember that? That just, yeah. And were they looking for your dad? Although we've heard that these things do follow family lines a lot of the time, right? So.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a one-off, but it was pretty wild.
But unfortunately, a lot of this alien stuff, even the more nefarious stuff, can be a one-off, quote-unquote, alien experience, right? Like the closest thing the box we can put it in would be alien. But a lot of these folks will say, well, yeah, but I live in a haunted house too. But I have this alien thing over here. But yeah, I have paranormal, quote-unquote, paranormal stuff on this side, right? Much like you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why I didn't know how to, I didn't know what box to put this event in.
Yeah.
Other than like paranormal. It's like, I guess that's part of all these things that have happened over the years. Yeah. I mean, nothing that I know of has happened since but there was that one thing that was really, really wild.
George, can you, I know that you can't describe the face because it was all scrambled up and you said it was short, but can you describe, how tall it was and what did its body look like? Did it have any clothing on, any spacesuits? Could you see its hands or its feet, anything like that? Can you just whatever details you can remember?
I just saw a 3.5 foot figure. I couldn't see any detail. Really? I mean, I saw where the face was scrambled. I might have seen some movement that could have been, appendages. I didn't see legs. Yeah, it was like I really couldn't really make out what it was. The whole thing may have been scrambled, I mean, I just have this memory of this dark, fuzzy, in terms of fuzzy being unable to see it, entity cruising into the room after blowing the door open and making a noise that I have not heard before or since.
So nothing in even in movies, has come close to what you heard.
No. Yeah, but I don't really, like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of movies that have depicted this. I never have a good memory for movies, but like, can you think of a movie where there was, the sounds made? Because it's always spoken of as if they were, it was telepathic.
Right, because you were quote unquote spoken to, like, hey, just chill out, George. Everything's cool, man. Like, don't worry about this. But the watery clicky sound. So, I mean, click. Anytime I hear aliens and clicking, I think of like the Predator noise, right? I'm trying to think of one though that was, because I can kind of hear that in my head, like a watery, clicky mixture sound, and I'm not really coming up with anything off the top of my head, but maybe I can look up some things and Unless you don't want me to send you things and go, hey, George, is this it? And you're like, yeah, it is. Thanks a lot.
No, I'm down with
Okay,
whatever you send
good.
me.
Yeah, because I think that would be pretty cool to maybe narrow it down to something similar. Because I've heard every once in a blue moon that these things make noise. I hear a lot that they talk in people's heads, right? We hear that, but the whole noise thing is interesting.
I mean, it was almost watery clicks and like almost maybe a beep or two, like something akin to a beep. I mean, if throwing those three sounds together, I mean, that's what it was.
Maybe it was its version of a 4-letter word because it came in the room and it goes, oh, crap, George is awake. I really screwed up here.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, it does, it does sort of seem like maybe that's what happened. That's the best crazy world we live in. That's the most logical thing I can think of for that. Because otherwise it just doesn't make any sense.
And then the pane of glass incident could be before or after, but since those two things, have you ever seen anything strange in the sky or anything that could be classified close to this at all?
No, I have not. But I've maintained an interest, and I think probably from that not long after that, I just sort of made the decision that, this is really there is such thing as aliens, basically.
Now, not that I'm attributing your friends, because it sounds like he's had a hard time in life, which I'm not saying that it's because of this one event. It could be. That could have triggered some kind of a really nasty PTSD, and that could carry on your whole life. That is possible, but I'm not saying that's what happened. But I just do wonder, because of the fact that you had such a calming effect to something that you should not have been calm about, they screwed up. But then again, who really got screwed up, at least that night, may have bled over, as I said, but at least that night was your friend. So he didn't receive the benefit of this calming gift that you were being imparted upon.
Yeah, I mean, for me to have, for my heart rate not to change when this happened is the thing that is really the thing that freaks me out. When I think about it, it's like, how could that, when the door is shaking on its hinges, this big, heavy door, this thing has entered the room and made its noises, and I'm dead flat.
Yeah, because even for the door to be shaking on its hinges and a person walks in, your heart rate, you'd be like, oh my God, you startled me. What the heck, But it wasn't even a human that walked through the door or strode or floated, whatever.
Yeah, and this is the middle of the night, and there was dead silence before this happened. So.
Yeah, it's a big no thanks for me. I think that's on my no list. That's not too pleasant of an experience. Although, I mean, as you say, you were calm about it then, and you're pretty calm about it now, but your poor friend didn't have that same experience. So I assume he never came back to your house.
I don't think so. But it was all just, because everybody knew, all my schoolmates knew that, George's house is haunted. And it certainly looked it. It looked like the Addams Family house.
Right.
And I think, he probably just said, well, if it's haunted like that, I ain't coming back.
So you didn't even have a discussion that next day, that next week, anything. You didn't want to talk about it?
I don't remember. I literally don't remember, Shannon.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I don't remember what the take was, because the take was, at the time, the take was kind of fuzzy right after it happened. It was
right.
like, huh. I was like I literally was, at 12 or however old I was standing in the hall saying kind of like, huh, it was weird.
I'd say weird kind of covers that one. Yeah, definitely. Were you, because once you start digging into the aliens and UFOs, and then especially abduction lore, did it though worry you a little bit more once you found out that your dad had this experience, especially with him having that 3 hours of missing time compounded with this strange mark on his body?
I was never worried. personally for me, I didn't think like, oh, I mean, now I'm on the list for being abducted regularly, or experiments will be done. I eventually figured, well, if this was what we're talking about, they probably came for him, and I was just collateral in the in the other room.
Do you have
Because
enough?
my
Sorry, go ahead.
parents' bedroom was right across the way. If the entity had just turned right instead of left, they could have blasted into that room.
And even with the door
Or
slamming essentially twice, they didn't wake up. They didn't get up and go, "What in the world was that?"
I think my mother got up probably within 90 seconds or so of this going down, just because the kid was like kind of screaming,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was this big to do having to get the kid's mother over, pick him up. It's like 3 or 4 in the morning. You know,
Yeah. So there,
something
there,
went down.
there was no silent shock on his part. It was all just screams right out of the gate, huh?
Yeah,
Mm.
nothing since.
Do you
Nothing since, thankfully.
nothing since, but since there is an interest in it, I mean, how could you not be, right? In some way, shape, or form, would you want to see anything like that again?
Sure.
Like in your home?
Hmm, maybe not. Like they come through the glass slider or something, and there they are. I don't want,
Yeah,
or like what was that Mel Gibson movie?
it's a
I don't want them to
science.
show up like that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's not, no, it's not fun.
it's upsetting.
Yeah, that they were not friendly little guys.
No,
It's just once they start showing up at the house and marks on bodies and missing time, it gets pretty dark with some of that stuff, you know.
sure. I'm sure you've heard scads of stuff pertaining to all this from every different angle, I'm sure.
But I've heard it exactly like yours, as I said, where it's a whole lot of I got ghosty stuff, and it's a haunted house. But then this one time there was this alien thing. That's the closest we can get there with putting it in a box is the alien thing, which is almost more fascinating in a way, because then you go, well, why was it just the one alien, quote unquote, alien thing, right? Why wasn't there more of that, or just that? Were they attracted to? Oh, did your dad ever live in any kind of a haunted house growing up? Anything like that? Was he around any? You said some of his family was obviously a little bit unique. Did you ever find out anything that they were into, or a place that they lived that might have any kind of a history or attachments of any kind?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he lived in some old houses growing up, but
Mm-hmm.
there was no kind of. I mean, he would have told me. I mean, my mother would have known and told me if there was any of that. My mother didn't have any of that. It was just showing up to this house, and the piano music was the start. I did, going back to one other thing I did experience. I think this was right before my father got rid of the house. I was there. I think I was back from college, and I walked down the hall. I think I was playing music fairly loud, and I walked into heavy, crackling air, like as if you were standing next to maybe like a huge generator or something. Like you could walk in and out of this heavy air in the hallway. And I called my father and I said, come out here. Just walk down the hall. I watched him from the other side, and he walked into it, and he's like, "What's that?" So like, he's like looking around like, is there something, is there an electrical problem, or what is that? But it was some heavy charged air. And I don't know what that is, but you could walk into it and out of it.
Was that by you and your parents' bedrooms?
No, it was downstairs.
Mm,
And I was playing some music at an aggressive level, which, could have been somebody was dismayed with it.
right. Right. And then you could go back, well, maybe that was the Irish nanny going, hey, I don't approve of this.
Right.
What about the land that the house sat on and then the surrounding properties? I mean, we're talking about Pennsylvania and lots of happenings, back in the day, as they say. Do you know any of the history of that?
Well, this property was a farm, many farms at that time. It was in a town that was, one of the first sort of suburbs, just because the train line that came out from Philadelphia allowed people to, I don't know if people were commuting in the 1860s, but, the train line coming out from Philadelphia was beneficial for a lot of people in these towns along the railroad. The land, I mean, there were other buildings that were connected with the property. I know one of our neighbors lived in one of the buildings that was like the cold house, where food was stored for, the main house, the main
Mm-hmm.
Walnut Hill house, and they had a stream running through their basement. And it was like that kept things cool, and it was this area where, this house was there basically to be a refrigerator. But that house was there, but there weren't structures around or anything. It's a
That
great property though.
I'll bet. Yeah, from the pictures I saw online, it looks so beautiful there. I suppose it's probably not as large of a parcel of property that it was when it originally started, but boy, what a beautiful home. That stream that you just mentioned that moved through the cold house, that sticks out to me because there's a woman named Debbie that's been on my show a couple times. She's also has a couple Patreon episodes, and she currently lives in this home, but she has more of, you could, of course, it's in haunting territory, paranormal territory, but also possible fae activity, especially outdoors. And we kind of put it together that there is an active running stream that flows right underneath the house. Do you know if that cold house stream also would run under or very near the main home?
No, I mean the main home was up on a hill,
Mm,
and I know where the stream was. It was at the bottom of the hill, and I know where it ran because there was a crazy tree that I always impressed me. It was a cypress, and it was incredibly tall, and it had the knees. And this is Pennsylvania. You don't expect to see cypresses with, the knees of a cypress.
yes, I do.
Yeah, I mean, this tree, which was immense, had, about 15 knees around it, and it was right over the stream that was headed, sort of lightly downhill to this neighbor's house. But the reason that cypress could grow there was because of that stream.
Right. Yeah, that water, the stream running through that place just made that pop into my head. I was just wondering about that. Water and the paranormal sometimes go hand in hand as well. But that's the thing about all of this, right? Because you're kind of going, well, these seem like separate events, but are they? Are they different things? I don't know. All right, George. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time out this evening.
Sure, Shannon.